Alright, the break is finally over, and we have the spoilers for Jujutsu Kaisen Chapter 259. First of all, thanks to Myamura for providing us with the leaks for the latest chapter. Otherwise, we will wait for a few more days to have an idea as to what's going on at the continuation of the past events, especially considering it has transformed from Jujutsu Kaisen onto Sukuna Kaisen once again. Admit it, you didn't expect that Sukuna would retake the spotlight to give his beloved nephew a harder time, didn't you? He truly deserves a nomination for the anime's Uncle of the Year award. But with that said, I won't bore you with hype, boring talks anymore. I know you are waiting as much as I am. So, let's proceed to the discussion of Jujutsu Kaisen, Chapter 259, Spoilers. Previously, Gege revealed that Yuji underwent a cheat session called Switch Training, or Replacement Training, in the official Viz version. Either way, this preparation enabled our guy to learn the reversed curse technique within just 1 month. In addition, it was also confirmed that he can activate the simple domain and probably more other abilities due to the said training. I am looking forward to seeing who, aside from Kusakabe, volunteered or got chosen as Yuji's partner, because that will show us what more hype skills were added to Yuji's arsenal of anti-Sukuna weapons. Well, speaking of abilities, Sukuna opens his furnace on the final page of the chapter, thus ending it with a hype cliffhanger. Okay, I know the TCB Scans version says open furnace, while the official English translated chapter opts for open divine flames. Both arguably can be the correct terms for the translation, but pause for a moment and let me know in the comments what of the two you prefer. Going back, it was honestly brutal, because that's when Yuji saw hope that they could overcome his uncle's incomplete malevolent shrine. Unfortunately, Chapter 258 was not another Yuji episode, as most of us expected, because man, the King of Curses, is definitely not over yet. That said, it seems like Yuji's not biological brother is taking the stage once again, because Ahoy Todo is back. We'll reach that part later, so let's start from the top of the leaks. The chapter begins with Yuji, Choso, and Kamo. Yuji asks Choso to teach convergence, but Choso isn't a good teacher. Kamo clearly explains how blood manipulation and convergence works. Choso says he can teach Yuji how to use a supernova attack, but Kamo rebukes Choso's suggestion and says Yuji should learn blood manipulation only to know how to stop bleeding and suturing. Choso gets sad and pouts for not being able to teach Yuji. The editor's comment here is actually funny for some reason. Take this with a grain of salt since this is not the final translation for the chapter yet, but here it is. Teach me Oni-chan, it says. Also, we have been wondering lately who in the world Yuji swapped souls with other than Kusakabe. I also mentioned it in the intro as a hype question, and I'm glad to say that we now have the answers. After all, Yuji reveals that the second person he swapped with is Yuta Okotsu. Moving on, the narrator mentions that only by going through the cooking processes of both dismantle and cleave will the door to Kamino open. It lacks the speed relative to its fire and has a narrator or narrower effect range. To resolve these issues, Sukuna imposed a binding vow upon himself. Afterward, Urame says, "It's our win," as the narrator continues to explain that Kamino's heat results in decompression and overpressure, leading to the death of living beings inside the domain. Moreover, this is Ryomen Sukuna's ultimate technique that slaughtered Maharaga in one strike. There is just one thing that I want to emphasize here, and that is Urame's declaration about the demise of the character staying inside Sukuna's malevolent shrine. Remember, the previous chapter has also mentioned something similar to this. Specifically, the note on the final page says, "The flames of certain death roar forth." Now, I don't know about you, but someone might bid his permanent goodbye in this chapter. We'll get into the next parts of the leaks in a minute, but before we proceed to the following events, I just want to emphasize something I forgot to mention in the last JJK episode. The first one is Miwa stepping up to protect Maki from the slashes of Sukuna's domain expansion, because it will definitely not leave her unscathed, even as someone who possesses heavenly restriction. There are some explanations behind Sukuna's current malevolent shrine, and it seems like various sources have different translations. Well, here's one. Sukuna expanded the open barrier domain, as he did in Shibuya, because he cannot trap Maki with a closed barrier domain. However, since it was a high-level domain, it only lasted over 90 seconds. There's one more correction that I want to mention later on, but I'll proceed to the continuation of the leaks for now. The narrator explains that during the Gojo fight, Sukuna had to repeatedly change the specifications of his domain, narrowing its effective range, due to which Sukuna deemed insufficient to unleash Kamino. Thus, Sukuna had to seal it during his fight with Gojo. Moving on, before the flames can hit Yuji, Choso sacrifices himself and makes a barrier around him to protect Yuji inside. Choso slowly dies as he says, "I'm sorry for being useless during our training." First and foremost, thanks to our viewer for pointing out that Yuji reattached his leg in the previous chapter after Sukuna struck it out. Apparently, Yuji also healed it using blood manipulation and a reversed curse technique. So yeah, Yuji is good, dude. I agree with you. But unfortunately, his big bro is definitely not okay, and I have a bad feeling about this. Myamura sensed this tragedy from miles away too, but who knew the prophecy would turn true just hours after this post? He also said this to make it clear that it was just a bad premonition and nothing else. Well, the current events prove his tragic prediction. Although they are not fully translated yet, the panels also suggest that Yuji is completely saddened by the turn of events, which means a lot to Choso. After all, the chapter will go downhill for these brothers from here on out. Here's a translation of the two's conversation while Choso is knocking at death's door. I won't recite it word by word, but this is more than enough punishment material for us JJK fans. In the end, Choso can only apologize as he tells Yuji, "I'm sorry for being useless during our training. I'm the type who does it on instinct." Sadly, this is related to the first parts of the leaks, as we saw Choso earlier unable to teach Yuji Supernova. Probably Kamo also handled the lessons for blood manipulation and whatnot. Choso and Yuji are in their imaginary soul world. Choso compliments Yuji for learning the reverse curse technique faster than him. Yuji says it's due to Sukuna using his body to achieve it, but Choso says it's okay. Little brothers are meant to surpass their older brothers. After that, Yuji scolds Choso and says you just can't disappear. Choso says, "Right, I need to apologize to Tsukumo too," and apologizes for leaving Yuji alone again. In reply, Yuji tells him, "You were always by my side when times were the toughest. That's more than enough." The scene then transitions to Choso's imaginative conversation with his other brothers, Aso and Kechizu. They basically talked about how cold it is and that they should speak to each other to forget the coldness. Eventually, there's no reply from Iso and Kechizu anymore as Choso mutters, "The 150 years we experienced were only a few days for Yuji." Back to reality, Choso departs with final words. "Thank you, Yuji, for becoming my brother." Yuji says goodbye to Choso as he finally says, "Thank you, Aniki," which means big brother. Wow, I'm sure this hits right in the heart of the audience. Is someone cutting onions? As everything crumbles down, Yuji helplessly asks, "Guys, someone..." The narrator then emphasizes that Yuji convinced himself he was a cog. No matter what happened, he was meant to fulfill his role. But as the scorched earth's heat began to push his way, it shook the foundation of his resolve. The resolve to repay his brother who had sacrificed his life to protect him. Oh man, I can't. Yuji's suffering just gets more intense in this chapter. Yuji hopelessly sees Sukuna coming towards him, but Ahoy to do once again arrives at a battlefield to help his brother. Oh yeah, now it's the other brother coming in clutch. In a flashback, Todo and Mei Mei plan on how to rescue people trapped inside Sukuna's domain. By using Mei's crow and Todo's boogie woogie, they can get people outside. Since Sukuna's domain instantly kills, Todo can't guarantee their lives, but it's good to try. Mei says since Todo will be outside Sukuna's domain, he has to expand his curse technique's range by a lot, so she asks if he can really do it with those arms. Todo says he's not really sure of succeeding. but he says he can feel the heartbeat of Boogie Woogie, meaning that it might still be alive. However, Todo says they can't let Yuji know of this plan. Yuji and Sukuna were two souls in one body. Even though it's in the past, that connection itself is strong. So there's a possibility of their plan unknowingly being spilled to Sukuna. The narrator also says that even Todo was uncertain of his allies' safety and couldn't manage to move Choso and Yuji outside because both of them were right at the center of the domain. He couldn't explain all this to Yuji. So Todo tries to encourage him by saying, "I'm sorry, brother, but they," referring to other sorcerers, "are probably all right." Yuji tries to steal his resolve by thinking other sorcerers are probably all right, and he has to believe in Todo for now. In the next moment, Yuji and Todo rush toward Sukuna as the narrator reveals that the King of Curses is now in a state where it's difficult to use his curse technique after the domain expansion. And this is where the coverage of the spoiler ends. Unfortunately, Yuji lost one brother as somewhat of a trade for Todo's return. I personally didn't expect this to happen to Choso, especially since his relationship with Yuji is getting more wholesome as the series goes on. Regrettably, this tragedy occurs, and I can do nothing about it. Well, except for cutting onions. In the end, the editor comments, "The path to victory linked by the brothers." So, yeah, I'm looking forward to reading the fully translated chapter. It seems like there's no break next week, too. So, see you again at the next JJK video. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button if you enjoy this spoiler review. That's all, and thank you for watching.